There is so much good that comes from being raised in a family that has the married mother and father, like the true nuclear family as it was defined back in the 1950s. Nowadays, there is this push for tolerance and inclusion that has all but eradicated the genuine definition of the nuclear family. Now, it was called the nuclear family because it was considered the nucleus of society. Study after study after study after study shows that children thrive best when they are raised in a household with the mother and the father who are married with children. That is the nuclear family. Back in 2010, the National Center for Health Statistics examined 7 family structures. They called those the nuclear family, the single parent family, the blended family, unmarried biological or adoptive families, where you have either biological or adopted children that are but the two parents are unmarried, cohabitating families, extended families, and other, which is one or more children living with related or unrelated adults who are not biological or adoptive parents. Now, which family did the report say works best? The nuclear family, which is to say 2 parents who are married to one another and are each biological or adoptive parents to all children in the family. Now, growing up, I whenever I talk about this, people are like, "Oh, there's domestic violence. There are all these situations, right?" I mean, you even talk about death, like a father dying, terrible, tragic situations, something that's happening that's not in alignment with faith or goodness. But at the end of the day, like, I used to even pray that my parents would get divorced. And when I was thinking about this video, I had to be honest with myself and say, wait, I technically don't come from a nuclear family. My family was blended. My mom had 3 children with her first husband and then married my dad. So yes, the parents that I grew up with are married. They are my biological parents alongside my 2 brothers who I was born in between. I was child number 5. But we also had half-siblings that were with us all the time except for every other weekend. My dad did not adopt those children. We were not technically a nuclear family. We were a blended family. And so even just with that, I'm like, because I used to say, I would pray that my parents would get divorced. They fought so much and it was just very difficult. I remember dreaming about which one I would choose to go live with. And truth be told, I cannot say how that would have affected me, how life would have played out, if I would have been better off or if I would be worse off. It's impossible to tell. We only know what we know. We can speculate, we can guess, we can make assumptions or assertions into how things would have been different, but at the end of the day, we don't know. And I think that my parents did the absolute best that they could with the situations that they had to cultivate as stable of a home life as they could. Right? Like, I truly believe that about them. I love my parents dearly. I see them regularly. And so all of these things are very important. And when you have children who are married, who are raised by married parents, they just do better on a wide array of outcomes, right? So they have stronger relationships with their parents, particularly with their fathers. They are much less likely to experience physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. They have better health, exhibit less aggression, are less likely to engage in delinquent behaviors, have greater educational achievement, and earn more as adults. They are also far less likely to live in poverty. Now, I would say that this would be privileged, right? There's this negative connotation that has occurred in our society where being privileged is somehow this disservice, that because you're privileged, you are therefore underprivileging others. This is one of the things that the ruling class has done. This has come from left ideologies that seeks to divide further and further. This person's privileged, this one's not. You go to third world countries and there are people who are happier with what they have than those who don't even live in poverty in the United States. There is greed, there is lust, there are so many detrimental dispositions going on in America right now that are absolutely driving me crazy. But one of them is this disregard for self-restraint. What creates a nuclear family? One of the big things, no sex outside of marriage. What a revolutionary concept, right? If you stop having sex outside of marriage, suddenly you're no longer having all of the babies out of wedlock. You're suddenly not having, right, the single mothers, the desire for abortion, all of these things, the psychological attachment that women develop to men who are abusive. You're not suddenly marrying someone because you're blinded by these negative behaviors. That's not to say that it always happens that way. I know women who waited until they were married, and I volunteer as tribute. I waited till I was married with my husband in our relationship. I hadn't prior, talked about that. But we waited till marriage, and the marriage was really hard for a really long time until I found out that he was being deceptive. And we had a very, very hard year healing that. And I am so grateful to say that we have come out on the other side of it. My husband has been dedicated to seeking God. And this is where religion, you talk about the practice of religion in a family has a positive effect on the children and on society. That the children of parents who regularly attend religious services exhibit better self-control, social skills, and approaches to learning. Because one of those reasons is because the parents are setting that example. My husband was not the perfect example of that in the past. He showed, certain obviously positive qualities prior to this recent deep turn to the transformative power of Christ. But now exhibiting this self-control, the social skills, the willingness to learn, all of that goes into true desire of faith, the true desire of seeking religion, the true desire to know God. I have all of these notes here I'm suddenly noticing that I made notes on that I wanted to talk about, and here I am talking about my husband and how proud I am of him, of his seeking and his faith. It is because of him that we have been able to maintain our family unit. Even though he almost destroyed it, it's because of him he redeemed it. And he redeemed it because God redeemed him, right? And so when we turn to religion, when we turn to that family structure, the one that created the concept of the nuclear family, because that's all that marriage is, right? It's the recognition of the natural mating of men and women. And in the Catholic Church, marriage is taking the vows and then consummation. That is what constitutes a marriage. And it's not intolerant to accept this reality, particularly when science consistently shows that it is what is best for children. Now, yes, I am anti-abortion. Yes, I am anti-birth control, pills, abortifacients, whatever you want to call them. You have the ability to not have sex outside of marriage. That is where the sex ed in our day and age, this ruling class seeking Planned Parenthood, the number of donors that Bill Donahue references in this book, The War on Virtue, the number of donors toward organizations that then turn and give hundreds of millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood, who, yes, I understand, they do pap smears, they do different things, but their primary goal is abortion. That is what they are known for. That is what keeps them in business. It is their primary source of income. It's what they get federal funding for. I'm so glad that if Planned Parenthood helped catch your cervical cancer, I'm so glad that they were able to help you. Unfortunately, one right does not correct 10 wrongs or 100 wrongs, whatever that direct ratio is now, today. I don't know what it is. I know that we are committing genocide against our own people. I know that millions of babies, of humans in this generation are lost. They died to abortion because life begins at conception. When the fertilization process occurs, that is when life begins. That's when an independent cell begins dividing with its own DNA. But that's what it does. So how did we get so far from this? How did we get from Adam and Eve, or, this recognition of the natural mating of men and women, because it's a piece of paper that recognizes that, to where we are today, where everything goes, everything is a nuclear family. The social structure has redefined it. And you get into how every single aspect of, if you live in the same house, you are a nuclear family. Well, that's just not true. You can't have, two men who did not have this baby. The mother and the father with the child, that is the nuclear family. That is like the most basic of basics, common sense, since it takes a sperm and an egg, and there's such a unique way that the sperm has to reach the egg. It takes that man and woman, like the complementary nature of the man and the woman to create that baby. And when that is reserved for marriage, you suddenly don't have a slew of these issues. Yes, rape occurs. Tragic, terrible, shouldn't be happening. That's not upholding what I'm talking about here, is it? And instead of telling men and families that they need to step up, everyone just keeps lowering the bar. They're like, oh, well, this child needs to be adopted, so like it should just go to anybody. Like one home is better than none. The foster care system is corrupt and screwed up, and CPS has issues, and so they should just never get involved. You know, one of the people said, and I'm sure it would come up in the comments at some point, where it says, you know, how do two men being married affect you? And as Bill says, well, you know what? It doesn't directly affect me. But neither does a man beating his wife. That doesn't directly affect me. Like, so does that mean I shouldn't care? Does that mean that I shouldn't advocate against it if I know that it's not going to fuel what's best for our society? Again, nuclear family, meaning the nucleus of society. In case you have forgotten, when you have a cell, it has its nucleus as the powerhouse of the cell. It is what feeds the cell. You have all your other pieces, but the nucleus of the cell with the mitochondria and all of those pieces, right? That is what feeds the cell. And so the nuclear family is the core of this molecule, of our society, right? So you have so much that's just been obliterated. People are trying to say it doesn't matter. It feels manipulative to me to try to say, oh, well, you're bad for trying to say this. Man, you're just being exclusive. It is exclusive because it takes a crap load. Like it takes so much self-discipline and so much self-sacrifice to get to the point of my children are going to be raised in a home where it is going to be the mother and the father. There are some sacrifices that some people make that are over the top, I think. You know, I don't think that you should stay in a physically abusive marriage. I think that's dangerous, not only for yourself, but for your children. And, you know, some men become that way because that's how their parents were. This is why, right, just like abstaining from so much physical contact prior to getting married so you can genuinely get to know the person. Because even kissing leaves DNA traces. I remember studying that years and years ago about how when you French kiss a man, his DNA gets imprinted on your tongue. Like the testosterone, the DNA, it interacts with your body even then. They start to make an imprint on your brain in some degree. It's incredible how God has designed our bodies to genuinely crave and desire the man that we are about to make a baby with, so that we are able to withstand these like terrible trials, the tumultuous trials that marriage inevitably brings. My husband and I will be married for 9 years this year, and you know, we have 4 kids together, and it's been just such a roller coaster. But at the end of the day, I'm so grateful that through all those years of questioning divorce, of being so sure that, you know, I'm gonna file for divorce now, that it just, we were able to sustain it. And that's no doubt it partially thanks, like probably in large part thanks to all of the prayers and contributions that this community has made. A lot of you knew the exact struggles that we were facing at the time, and so many of you carried us through prayer. And I have no doubt that heavily influenced our outcome. So I, from the bottom of my heart, am so grateful for that, especially reading about all of this stuff, just with that reminder of how important our family structure is, that if I were to have divorced him and married somebody else and had more children with them, that is a blended family. And that did weigh into my decisions because it is essential. It's very important. So at the end of the day, this nuclear family, it's not a mistake. Like I said, I think it can be one of the most common sense things that's out there. The egg and the sperm and how the sperm has to get to the egg. And you can try to say, oh, well, the lab can do that, but that's like a supernatural thing. That's not something that's natural. And it's you know, it's beyond what naturally occurs. And I think it's just really important to identify that. So moving forward, 1953, we have Hugh Hefner, who founded Playboy, right? You have the Playboy Mansion. And the Playboy philosophy is what Bill talks about here. So I'm flipping forward to page 133, and he talks quite a bit about how self-restraint is just terrible. Selflessness? Why? Happiness is pleasure. That's what it's all about. And this whole sexual revolution of thought continues, right? It feeds into the 60s, 70s, 80s. Birth control comes around, all these things. When I was reading about some of this stuff with Hefner, it made me think of Epstein, honestly. When he talked about The Secrets of Playboy, the docuseries that came out on A&E, he talked about how Hefner was an equal opportunity predator who had sex with men, women, and dogs. He was accused of raping multiple women. If he got a gal pregnant, he arranged for an abortion. Like many men who are addicted to pornography and live a promiscuous lifestyle, Hefner was unable to get aroused without partaking in new experiences, some of which were sickening, to put it mildly. He provided girlfriends with drugs to endure constant orgies that he watched voyeuristically. Further, he engaged in acts of bestiality and forced others to do the same. As revealing as all of this is, it was the advent of the Playboy Philosophy series in the December 1962 issue of the magazine that gave the sexual revolution its ideological springboard. So he basically just started laying everything out, right? The individual is the all-important element in society, not the family, which Bill actually touches on right at the beginning of this chapter, the devaluing of the family, where he says that there were three types of family structures. It was sociologist Carl Zimmer identified three family structures found throughout history, which were the trustee, the domestic family, and the atomistic type. So the trustee was essentially the absence of individual rights. It was the strongest form of family where there was almost no concept of the individual at all. So that's probably like the authoritarian family, right? The trustee, very strict. This is like, we are a unit. Then you have the domestic family, where the rights of the individuals are acknowledged by the state, which just begins to weaken the control of the family, but is probably a little bit more balanced, right? That's like the authoritative, as I read all of this, the intermediate structure. Like, yes, we are all individuals, but we operate together as a family unit, and parental authority is still given a high level of respect and structure, right? Like, it is still the parents who, I wouldn't necessarily say like are owners of the children, but they are their dependents, right? That is just what it is. They are dependent on the parents, and so therefore the parents have a say in what occurs in their lives. And then you have the third type, which is the atomistic, I'm going to just say atomistic type, which is individualism reaches its maximism and is done at the expense of the authority wielded by the family. So I feel like we see this now more than ever. I was even just reading this week about parents from Colorado had submitted an appeal to the Supreme Court to be reviewed because the school had spoken to their children about gender identity without permission, and the children were encouraged to not tell their parents about it. And the Supreme Court denied their request to be heard. And probably because there's not much that they could do in that situation. It's kind of like police, right? They can't do anything on a preventative level. They can only do something if harm has been perpetrated. They have to wait for something to happen where actual harm has been perpetrated before they can act. So I assume that that's why it was denied. But nonetheless, this idea of parents not having authority in their homes because of the individual rights of the child, that is not to, right, people can take that and spin it in whatever way. Like, that's not to say that abuse is okay, or to say that, children who are not being treated properly. I have had to call CPS on one family, and it was very legitimate. It was very difficult for me to do. I questioned it all along, but I had serious concerns. There was a repeated behavior that was not of a need, that was not being met for the child. And that is the only time that I've ever had to do it, and it was very unfortunate. And right, because I do believe that every family parents differently. Like, I do believe that parents know their children best. They are biologically wired to be similar to us, and so one family, their family structure is going to look very different than my family structure because their kids are not my kids. My kids are biologically wired to be more in tune with me than any other adult. it's just the truth. It's just how reality works, right? And so I think that that's why it's just so important for children to stay with their biological parents, if at all possible. So anyway, so back to this Playboy philosophy, though, where you have the individual as the all-important element in society, where you have the family, that's actually important. And the Playboy philosophy maintained that the primary goal of society should be individual happiness. And as I said, he defined happiness as pleasure. He said happiness and pleasure are mental and physical states of being, and society should emphasize the positive effects of both. So that's something that's just not even Christian. That's not something that is rooted in what has created our country, in what we are founded on, in the liberty and justice for all. The family structure is who teaches their children to use freedom properly. A couple videos ago, when we're talking about liberty, what is liberty? What does it mean to have free will? Does that mean that you can just do whatever you want and so you should choose to do the bad thing? Or does it mean that you have the free will to choose the right thing? In my situation with my husband, I may have felt that my free will was stripped from me, that I didn't have a choice anymore. I had to leave him. How could somebody who loved me do this to me? My free will was stripped. But no, I was able to utilize my liberty and my ability to make free choices to wait. And I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I made no rash steps. And at the end of the day, the Lord has healed so much hurt in my life. I feel like it was a night and day difference one day. Or I don't even remember when the day was. All I know is that 3 months ago felt very different. And now we are so stable and happy, and yes, life is pleasurable together. And I don't know how else to describe it, but that wasn't my goal. It wasn't I'm going to stay with him so that I can experience happiness and pleasure with him. If anything, I wanted to leave him to attempt to pursue happiness and pleasure with someone else. And so the way that plays out in my brain right now is just kind of mind-blowing to me, because it's that was never even my goal. My goal for happiness and pleasure would have included leaving him. Whereas now my goal in continuing to stay with him is still for the betterment of my family. It's for the betterment of him, the betterment of myself. What does God want us to do as this nuclear family, as the mother and the father who are married with children? What do I want to do with that? So, happiness and pleasure was never at the forefront of my mind as my primary goal in my decision making. Now, did I think about it? Yeah, I was very tempted to pursue that and thinking that it could be fulfilled elsewhere. And at this point right now, I'm very grateful for everything that has come to be in our family. So another thing that Hugh Hefner had claimed was that there was not enough separation of church and state, and that freedom from religion was being neglected. So how much do we hear that today now, right? People are saying, oh, separation of church and state, separation of church and state. The purpose of separation of church and state was to protect the church from the state. We saw that most recently. Was it in California, where they decreed that if somebody confesses, murder or child abuse, I think it was child abuse in the confessional, the priest does not have to report it. The priest is not a mandatory reporter. And everybody freaked out about it. And we said, no, this is what separation of church and state means. This is a fundamental crux of Catholicism, that when you enter the confessional, the seal of confession is there. Under no circumstances can the priest reveal what is revealed there, because it's between the person and God. The priest is merely a vessel in order to absolve sins due to the seed of Peter that has ordained him to be in that position. You have to have separation of church and state. Otherwise, you're compromising the fundamental values that the religion has, that Catholicism holds there. And so separation of church and state is actually to protect the church, not to protect the state. But here, Hugh Hefner is alleging that freedom from religion is being neglected. And that because we have separation of church and state, we can't have the church influencing the state at all. We should all have free will to do whatever heinous things we want. Why do we need to feel shame about this? Why should anything be discouraged? Why can't we just pursue anything that pops into our heads? Why do we need to show self-restraint? Self-discipline, perseverance, and personal responsibility are virtues that Hefner disparaged. Right? He treated selflessness as a sin. Hugh Hefner said, we oppose the tendency to meaningless selflessness in our present society, and singled out self-sacrifice and self-denial for condemnation. We appreciate selflessness as a virtue. we would say, if I can put myself after the next person, to love my neighbor as myself, be willing to lay my life down for him, just as Christ laid his life down, that this is a good thing. Mother Teresa, Saint Mother Teresa, Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, she exemplified selflessness. She did everything we can. She could to pursue that. And Hugh Hefner says, no, that's actually terrible. Awful thing to do. Don't do that. Why would you do that? Self-restraint? It's a myth. Not worth it. It's not going to bring any goodness. Do whatever feels right. Couldn't be further from Christianity. Couldn't be further from Catholicism, where we're called to pursue God so that we can grow in the virtues of temperance, of self-control, of self-discipline. So we don't pursue gluttony, so we don't pursue lustful behavior, so we don't pursue greed and envy, so that we grow away from those things that were so deeply valued. I don't know how else to get this society back to the true nuclear family other than through example. I don't know that there is any other way. I'm teaching a catechism class right now, and one of the main things that I just keep thinking about is these kids are only going to really grow in their faith as much as their parents exemplify. If I want the kids to show up in their Sunday best, the parents need to be doing that. They are their child's primary educator. They are the ones showing their children what it means to dress for the occasion, right? Would you let them wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt to a wedding? Or would you say, no, we're going to a wedding. You need to wear a dress. Like, this is a fancy occasion. They were the flower girl and they wanted to wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Like, would it be worth the fight then? When you attend Mass, it's like a wedding. You are attending the sacrifice of the Lamb, not re-sacrificing, but the demonstration of and the consecration where Jesus is present. You're dressing for the occasion. That's what modesty is. Modesty, a huge part of modesty, is dressing appropriately for the occasion. And so it's like I think about the parents and how much they need to be examples. So all that we can do as people who are doing our best to honor God, rejecting these very secular ideas of what it means to live, embracing self-discipline, embracing selflessness, embracing all of these pieces, even though the world is trying to tell us that it's wrong of us, that if we do this, we're being intolerant, that in order to be accepting of people in this world, we have to expose our children to XYZ TV shows so that they can learn how to be socially appropriate and whatever. It's bogus and it's not true. Do not fall victim to the lies of the devil. Ground yourself in Scripture. Ground yourself in your family. Seek help if you need it. Hopefully you've married somebody who is willing to listen to reason, who is willing, it even says it's biblical to say, talk to your brother, talk to your spouse if something's not right. If he doesn't listen, if she doesn't listen, you bring somebody else along, maybe you meet with a priest. And then if that still doesn't work, then you go to the congregation, then you go to a larger group, right? You don't just go straight to, you don't just abandon, you don't just give up on the first sight of everything. There's a lot of really hard work and everything's so individual because intentions matter so deeply. That's why the Bible talks about, if you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Because spiritually you have. Spiritually, your intention, and honestly, I do believe that particular verse too is like referencing masturbation and actually engaging in the fullness of the action with thinking of that woman, that you've committed adultery in your heart. And so we just have to be so mindful and we have to be on such large guard, like deep guard for those lies that the world is trying to feed us. And along that, this week I was sent a book. So this is what War on Virtue looks like by Bill Donahue. This is the book I'm reading. I'm reading Devaluing the Family. But this week I received this book. It's called Warrior Mom. Timothy Atenise, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he had reached out to me. This is his publishing company, and he wrote this book, and it's Defending Your Children in the Court of Heaven. And I started looking at it, and I was reading it, and it's just full of, in the name of Jesus, I dismantle every plan and assignment of the enemy targeted at my children. I bind and render null and void every demonic force that seeks to harm or influence them negatively. Pages. It's numbered. He went through, there are just little paragraphs, and you can read all of these things, like, Lord, I declare that no weapon formed against my children shall prosper. I decree and declare divine immunity and supernatural protection over their lives. Right? I pour your blood over their minds. And just talking about safeguarding your children and praying for them. And as I was looking at this book, I suddenly saw it right next to this and I said, oh my gosh, they look so similar. How, like, did he know that this book looks like this? Did he know? Because I feel like these two books just go so much hand in hand, where it's like, let's protect the next generation. Let's cover them in prayer in the power of Christ. Whether or not Timothy is Catholic or not, I don't know, but this book is wholeheartedly Christian, and the only difference that you would end up seeing would be if would just be that it's not leaning into Mary, our Blessed Mother, as well. But as it is, these are words from the Holy Spirit. These are, it's identifying the spiritual battle that we're in and that our children are growing up in and that they're going to have to face as adults. And the best thing that we can do is to cover them in prayer, cover them in the blood of Christ, cover them in every avenue that we can to keep them safe. And so if you want to read along as we're continuing talking about this every week, which this week honestly was much more up my alley of things I'm passionate about, the family structure, things of that nature, way more interested in, preserving that than I've necessarily ever dove into, like, racism or dividing these things by race. Even in this book, Bill talks about how different ethnic groups have responded in the family structure. And it's just not something, like, I so deeply just view Americans as Americans, like, people as people, and cultures as cultures. Like, yes, there are different cultures, and I think that they're really important to identify and for individuals to see with. But I feel that I should speak to those that resonate with me. And, like, right, it's just so interesting. But I really resonate with family structure. And I just pray that people from every ethnic culture can find places to identify and see goodness and wholeness and fruitfulness of good, like good fruit that can come from honoring and respecting the pieces that I've brought forward today. So, and then if you're interested in checking out Warrior Mom, I believe that's also available on Amazon or online, wherever you may find it. And just definitely recommend giving that book a good look. So, God bless you. Thank you for tuning in today. I look forward to chatting with you again next week, where we're going to be talking about the poor, giving up on the poor, how the left has actually separated, divided, and called out the poor, and not given them the stepping stools that they need to actually get back on their feet and get re-involved in society in the way that they truly need. So, God bless. I'll talk to you soon.